Basically, I'm going to explain the water cycle and what it is and its process and the different components of it. Basically, the water cycle is a continuous cycle where water evaporates, travels into the air, then becomes part of a cloud, and then again falls back down to the earth in the form of precipitation. And as I mentioned, it's a continuous cycle. So it has been, the water cycle has been happening for years and will continue to happen for years. It's the reason why the earth is watered and why plants grow and we have water to drink. Without the water cycle, the earth wouldn't flourish like it does. So the first part of the water cycle is precipitation, and I have it pulled up right here. So precipitation is whenever the rain falls, and it's explained in the simplest forms of like when rain falls or when it snows or when it sleets, like any form of moisture that falls to the earth. Precipitation helps fill lakes, rivers, waters plants. Basically helps us so that we can drink water and things like that. And some places experience more precipitation than other places do, just based on climate. That's why deserts are dry and the rainforest has a lot of rain. They both experience precipitation just in different levels. Evaporation, after it rains, for example, water always dries up. We don't just continue to experience wetness after it rains. The rain begins to dry up. So you can see evaporation in this process, and in this process, evaporation, the water rises up into the sky. It becomes little water droplets, and it's the gas form of the water cycle. So the rain rises back up into the atmosphere from the Earth's surface. And after evaporation comes condensation, and during condensation, water droplets, the water cools and forms into droplets, and the water prepares to fall from the sky in precipitation again. The best example I can think of for this is like the water droplets on the outside of like a really cold glass. Like when you have ice in your glass, it never fails, there's water on the outside, even if you didn't get the cup wet, and that's condensation. So these all are related, as I was kind of like leading into earlier, into the water cycle. So you start with condensation and you work your way to precipitation and then evaporation again. So condensation, the water droplets cool and they begin to form, and then the clouds become heavy, and the precipitation, it rains, the water falls, and then it kind of sits on the ground, it'll fill up a river, it'll sit in the ground, and then it'll evaporate again once the sun comes out, and just start the cycle all over again. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, it's a continuous cycle. It's been going on forever, it'll continue to go on forever. And also when the water hits the ground, so there's multiple things it can do. It can either fill up a river, ocean. It's why our oceans have never run dry, because of the precipitation. And it can also do something called infiltration. And infiltration is basically when the water soaks into the ground and waters plants or wets the soil. And the amount of infiltration is dependent on how much it rains, as well as the type of soil, how well the soil in the area soaks it up, and it's what waters plants and provides the world with water to drink in the form, it provides the world with water to drink and us with food to eat because our crops are watered. And our animals also have things to drink. So if it weren't for the water cycle, the world would not be flourishing in the way it does. And thanks to the water cycle, it never ends, so we never have to worry about not surviving because we don't have water.
What do I think constitutes a good lesson plan in science? I think that a good lesson plan looks like a lot of hands-on activities for the students, whether it's experiments or use of technology or different things, just where the students can kind of see how the concept that they're learning kind of applies in real life. And this is important because it kind of just sticks with students better when they're able to see examples of what they're learning rather than just sitting in a desk and being fed information. They're able to like get up and explore the concept themselves and kind of figure it out themselves, and it just sticks better in those instances. What do you think your students should be learning from science? I think students should, one, be learning the concepts that they need to be learning, but also just how it applies in real life. A lot of students aren't going to be like scientists someday or different things, but obviously the things they're learning in the classroom are seen as important. So I think they should just be learning about how it applies to life and why science is important, just to like the well-being of the earth. Um, and then what do you think constitutes using technology well? I think using technology well looks like not allowing technology to take place of the teacher in the classroom. Um, Technology, I have found, just through like learning about to use it in the classroom and things, is a very helpful tool, but it's very easy to kind of like let it mask your teaching and to let it kind of just take place of the role of the teacher. So I think using technology well in the classroom looks like making a lesson plan and then fitting technology into it, but still letting the teacher have the loudest voice in the classroom and letting the students discuss openly, without the use of technology. And what do you think your students should be learning when using technology? One, I think they should be learning the concepts. Like, I think that's the most important thing is what the teacher's goal in teaching a lesson is. Whatever that is, that's what the students should be learning. Um, but I think they should also be learning how to use technology and how to integrate it into their lives in a very healthy way rather than letting it become something that's a bit of an addiction. Yeah, so I think students should be learning first and foremost the concepts in the classroom, and second of all should just be learning how to use technology and how to use it well in various different situations. Video 3 journal entry, and the first question that was asked is, how did you consider your planning for your intro lesson plan? And when I first started writing the lesson plan for the water cycle, I definitely was very focused on the fact that my students would, the information that they needed to know would be relayed to them. I don't think that I was very aware of how to connect with my students and how to connect like the idea of the water cycle to my students' understandings. I definitely like had fun activities for them to do, but I don't think that they're activities that were unique to the water cycle and would really help them understand. Now that I've revised my lesson plan, how do I think about lesson planning differently? I think I'm definitely more aware of students and what would be beneficial for them in the lesson. And I think I'm also aware of like what could go wrong in a lesson, and more aware of looking at, okay, what are things that could go smoothly in this lesson plan, and then those things that I think will go smoothly, how could there be a bump in the road with them? What did I consider when I thought about my students? I definitely became more aware of catering a lesson plan towards students' interests. They're the ones who are learning the information. They're the ones who need help understanding the information. So I think I became more aware of how to make this information applicable to them and make it interesting and make it fun so that it's something that they're excited to learn about. Um, yeah, what were misconceptions, knowledge, and student difficulties? I think, yeah, kind of like what I was saying. Those things in my lesson plan that I thought were going to go really well, some of them didn't go very well, so I think I was just challenged to become more aware of what those things that I think might go right, how they could actually go wrong. And yeah, I think I became a lot more aware of like where students might struggle, and that struggle is to be expected in a lesson, no matter what it is. What technological ideas did I take into consideration? When I first did my lesson plan, I wasn't really planning on using technology at all, just because I kind of wanted my students to interact with the water cycle rather than use technology. And when it boiled down to it, I ended up using a video to kind of just help ingrain the idea of the water cycle being a continual process and helping my students understand that. And then when my first finalized lesson plan, I had 2 videos, and that was just too much. So whenever I revised my lesson plan, I ended up just like cutting one of the videos out and keeping one of them in. um, have you incorporated scientific modeling into your lesson plan? Yes. My second lesson plan, I had the students up and moving around, and they were given the option to either to somehow model the lesson plan with their bodies, whether it was through actions or whether it was there are different stations throughout the room, and they pretend to be like precipitation for one cycle, and then they'd be like, okay, so I'm rain now, and then they'd get to one station in the room and just kind of move around. And I gave the students the freedom to decide how they wanted to model the water cycle. When I taught the lesson the second time, they decided that they wanted to do hand action. So I think like precipitation was like this, and evaporation was like this or something. So yeah, I used that modeling to kind of allow the students to make this idea of the water cycle more their own. Um, yeah, and so, yeah, I chose to incorporate that just so the students, it would be theirs so that they could remember it more. Because if I were up there telling them, okay, this is the action for this, they'd be a lot less likely to remember it than if they were coming up with the idea themselves. And that just kind of helps them in their learning. Because, yeah, it gives them ownership for these actions and these ideas and helps them remember the concept better. Um, and then how did I incorporate technology into my lesson plan? Like I said, I had a couple of videos, and for my revised lesson plan, I ended up taking one of the videos out because it was just almost too much and it was kind of repetitive. And I the one video that I did use the second time, it was very helpful. I like followed the suggestions of my peer reviewers and like paused the video throughout the whenever concepts were brought up. So like after the video defined precipitation, we paused it and we discussed it. And we're like, what is precipitation? What do you guys wonder about precipitation, and what do you think about it? And we wrote it on the board, and as we went through each concept, we wrote it out on the board and then made the connection that it's one big cycle. And that technology was very helpful because it gave technology a little bit of a voice in the classroom. So I wasn't the only one talking to them, and the questions they had could either be answered by me, and what wasn't answered by me would be answered by this informational video. And then we had a discussion about it, and the video kind of spurred discussion and allowed the students to ask questions and just mention what they noticed about the water cycle and what they were